Hey everyone, I'm here with the Issaquah Christians in Issaquah, Washington. We're so happy that you could join us in this quick review of our summer series. We're really excited about the summer series we have coming up in 2024. We're going to be looking at shadows of things to come. We're primarily focusing on elements of what we call the Old Testament, which is the Hebrew Scriptures, and saying how they anticipate Jesus. So lots of really, really well-known stories. There's a lot of abstract stories too in the Old Testament. And through this summer, we're going to be unpacking both known and unknown stories to see how Jesus is really the fullness of those shadows that used to come before it. I've got with me Dan May. He's been preaching in the area for 20 years, and we are delighted to have him back. We've had him out at our group several times, and we're very happy to have him with us. Dan, how are you doing today?
Very good. Good to be with you.
So we've got two topics this summer. We're delighted to have you speak on two topics. This first topic that you're going to kick us off this summer is called The Gospel of Jesus in Hebrew, focusing on Genesis 1:1. And this study is probably one that strikes me as unusual. You're probably not going to have heard something quite like this before. Do you want to give us a quick overview of what you're going to be talking about?
Well, let me give you the genesis of that, no pun intended. I have been to China a couple of times, and we use kanji over there to teach the Chinese people. And kanji is the ancient Chinese language. It's a pictographic, ideographic language, at least originally. And so we use that to show the story of the Bible from Genesis chapter 1 through verse 11 is embedded in their language. And of course, Genesis 11 is when they migrated to China. They would have gone east to where they are now in China. But language is based on common history, accepted knowledge. And so these pictographic letters and words have within them, embedded within them, the shared history of mankind that existed from Genesis 1 through 11. So, and we do that to show the Chinese people that Christianity is not a Western religion, it's an Eastern religion. It originated in Asia. And then now when they see the Bible story in their very language, it's very impressive to them. So in the course of doing that and studying that and then teaching classes when I got back to the States and presenting Bible classes with kanji, because it's very much a faith building for us, I came across the same kind of thing in Hebrew. There were four major pictographic, ideographic languages. There's the Mesopotamia with cuneiform. There's Egyptian with hieroglyphics. And there is kanji, which is the Chinese and Japanese. And then there's Hebrew. And in looking at that, I came across the same kind of pictures and meanings. And of course, the conundrum for linguists is, where did all these languages come from? They don't even discuss it. They don't want to talk about the origins of language, even though, and we know why, because God created them. He created them fully formed with all of their syntax and all of the pragmatics and morphology and all of the stuff that goes with language, and they won't even discuss it. They just say, we don't know. So when I started looking at the Hebrew, and I came across as I was studying for the kanji, I came across this information a couple of different places, and then started looking at it. And in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the ancient Hebrew words and letters that are used to form those words is the story of the Son of God and his sacrifice. And it's just right there. As you look at those pictographic letters, you can see that. And so that's what we're going to be discussing and looking at. I'm not a Hebrew scholar, never have claimed to be, don't play one on TV. It's just, so I'm going to go through. Hebrew was always like you dipped a chicken in the ink and let it run across the page. That's what Hebrew letters look like to me. And so I'm going to give a real quick primer, in Hebrew, the letters themselves that make up the 22 letters of the alphabet. And then we'll just cover the ones that are used in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1.
So a fully formed language has to have 5 developed components, right?
Right.
I imagine you're going to be using some of these terms pretty commonly. The words phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. Do you want to give a quick definition and overview of what those are so we can all be
Well,
aware?
I'm actually not going to be using that, but the phonology just has to do with the sound of the words, the sound of the language, and how they speak the language. Morphology is how the words are actually formed. And, again, linguists that talk about grunts and chirps and, getting it from animals, and that there's no history, there's no evidence that ever occurred. Syntax is the arrangement of those words. A very simple example of that, we would talk about a big river, and the Spanish would talk about a Rio Grande. And so just the way they order them. Semantics is the logical meaning of those words, and then the pragmatics is the organization of the language. And just like what you and I are doing right now, we're taking turns speaking. That's part of the pragmatics of language.
So with all the discussion about where does language come from, isn't it amazing that language is divine, that it was not an invention of mankind?
Right.
In fact, language pre-existed the formation of material, since the very way that God formed us is God said.
Right.
So the concept of language, we don't know what language God was speaking, but the concept of communication was there prior to him ever making any other being to communicate with other than and outside of his own self.
Right. And I would imagine that spoken language actually predated written language, because when they're trying to communicate their words and then have it recorded or to send that message in some other way, they had to use symbols. We have our own thing is called sign word relationship, which is we just use letters and put them together to make sounds and so forth. Ideographic is you have a sign that's communicating an idea, and then pictographic is a sign that is depicting a picture of the thing, the sign thing relationship. So you got the thing here that I'm trying to use for a sign. And consequently, for instance, to hide or to send, I can't remember which one it is, kanji now, but any of those terms like that in kanji have 2 trees. There's 2 trees that are part of that. Well, you have the tree of life and you have the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And so that has to do with sin and trespass. Sacrifice always has a knife and a lamb, a picture of those in the original in Chinese. And so as they're trying to communicate with one another, they have to have this shared history, this shared knowledge, so that they can write down the symbol or the sign or the picture or the ideograph to communicate what they're trying to say. And Hebrew is not any different from that. And I agree with you. When I talk about this, Hebrew is God's language. And the only reason, all of the languages are God's language, but Hebrew was the language that God chose to reveal his will. Hebrew is the words that God with his own finger wrote on those stone tablets for the 10 Commandments. And so Hebrew has a closer relationship, let's put it that way, with God than any other language.
So you've referenced Genesis 11 a couple times, kind of this climax to the opening of Genesis in which all the nations are dispersed, and they're, of course, trying to make a name for themselves.
Right.
Don't you find it remarkable that when you get to the time of Jesus, you get to Pentecost, and you have representations of those languages from all across the world that are then coming together under the one name of Jesus Christ, a reversal, if you were, of that process.
It is. It's exactly that. God changed their languages or confused their languages is the term to get them to separate. In Acts, the 2nd chapter, the languages are used to bring them back. and to unite them. So it's Pentecost is Babel reversed.
Yeah. And so the shadows that were kind of laid out at the beginning kind of come to light then in Jesus. And that's a great idea of what we want to be talking about in this series. Do you have any last tidbits for us, things that we can look forward to in this lesson?
In this lesson, I do have one special little treat that I'm going to give at the end, where we look at a word out of Genesis 1:1, and we see how the letters of that word are used later on to make a very famous psalm that we read about. And so I'll save that for the precision of that, or the exact nature of that, until later, until I give the lesson.
Great. Well,
I'm a hook to try to get people to come. So
absolutely. Look forward to seeing you. Hope you all can join us. We're starting in just under 2 weeks' time, right? So hope to see everybody out.